references being shared across the community, organized for quick browsing. Use it to spot patterns, pull links, and build your own research list. Qnotables.com. Browse the notables, verify the facts, stay informed. All reports can be found on Q Research or Qnotables.com. Notables do not equal endorsements. We are researchers who deal in open source information, reasoned argument, and dank memes. We do battle in the sphere of ideas and ideas only. We neither need nor condone the use of force in our work here.
From the Q Research Boards, February 4, 2026. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem held a live press conference in Arizona alongside Customs and Border Protection officials to announce what her office described as a major border wall update. DHS and CBP framed the announcement as part of expanded border infrastructure and enforcement operations. Officials said more details would be released through formal DHS and CBP channels as implementation moves forward. House Judiciary Republicans held a February 4th hearing titled Europe's Threat to American Speech and Innovation, Part 2, focusing on allegations that European regulations and pressure campaigns have influenced how U.S.-based platforms moderate content worldwide. Lawmakers highlighted an interim committee staff report alleging a long-running effort to shape online speech rules that affects Americans. Democrats challenged the framing, while witnesses debated the line between regulation and censorship. The Washington Post announced sweeping layoffs, cutting about a third of its staff and restructuring coverage across major departments. Reporting says the paper is eliminating or shrinking sections, including sports and books, and reducing foreign coverage in bureaus. Leadership told employees the changes are aimed at reshaping the organization around fewer priority areas and adapting to shifts in audience behavior and economics across the news business. Senator Mitch McConnell was hospitalized for evaluation after experiencing flu-like symptoms, according to statements attributed to his office and multiple reports. His team said he checked in out of caution and that his prognosis is positive. McConnell missed Senate activity during the hospitalization, and updates on his return timetable were expected to follow as doctors complete evaluation and treatment. The New START nuclear arms treaty reached its expiration window in early February, ending the last major binding U.S.-Russia limit on deployed strategic nuclear warheads and launchers. International leaders warned that letting the treaty lapse increases the risk of a renewed arms race and reduces transparency measures that previously helped manage escalation. Calls are growing for a replacement framework or interim commitments while negotiations remain uncertain. U.S.-Iran nuclear talks are being planned to take place in Oman, with reporting indicating the venue shifted at Iran's request and with U.S. agreement. The discussions are expected to address nuclear constraints and wider regional tensions, and officials have signaled that formats and participants could still change. The talks come amid heightened military posture and public warnings from leaders on both sides about consequences if diplomacy fails. The World Government Summit continued with Day 2 live programming, featuring government leaders, policy officials, and major institutional speakers discussing future governance, technology, security, and economic development. Organizers promoted the day's sessions as part of a multi-day agenda, with several tracks running in parallel and live stream coverage made available to global viewers. Key announcements, if any, were expected to be pushed through official summit channels as sessions concluded. In the United Kingdom, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly Prince Andrew, moved out of Royal Lodge and relocated to a residence on King Charles III's Sandringham estate, according to major reporting. The move follows renewed scrutiny tied to newly released Epstein-related material and ongoing political and public pressure. Police and officials have indicated they are reviewing aspects of the new information, while Andrew has continued to deny wrongdoing. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer escalated pressure on senior figure Peter Mandelson amid renewed Epstein-linked controversy, with reporting saying Starmer provided a dossier to police and pushed steps that could strip Mandelson of status and force resignation. The dispute is unfolding alongside parliamentary and media scrutiny, with Mandelson facing mounting calls to step down while authorities assess what, if any, formal action follows. Border Czar Tom Homan announced an immediate drawdown of roughly 700 federal personnel from Minnesota, describing the move as part of adjustments to Operation Metro Surge in the Twin Cities. Homan said the decision followed operational reviews and public pushback, and he highlighted a new push for consistent use of body-worn cameras across teams after acknowledging uneven compliance. Officials said enforcement priorities and staffing levels will continue to be evaluated as the operation changes. Secretary of State Marco Rubio delivered opening remarks at the Critical Minerals Ministerial in Washington, framing critical minerals as a core national security and industrial supply issue. Rubio emphasized coordination with allies and partners to strengthen mining, processing, and supply chains, and argued for more dependable markets that support long-term investment. The event brought together international delegations and industry stakeholders as the administration pushes policies to reduce reliance on adversarial supply routes. Vice President J.D. Vance outlined a U.S.-backed plan for a critical minerals trade bloc aimed at stabilizing prices and reducing dependence on China's dominance in processing. Reporting says the proposal includes coordinated price floors and trade preferences among participating countries, with U.S. officials pitching the effort as a way to make supply chains more predictable for defense and advanced manufacturing. Markets reacted cautiously, with concerns that price management could distort investment signals.
At shop.isitwaya.com, everything you buy supports Acun.top, the place where people talk freely no matter what. Check out our Acun Honey Pot, a jar of yummy honey that's as strong as your voice. Put it on toast or in tea. It's not just honey, it's freedom in every bite. Then there's Acun Butter, a smooth handmade skin cream that makes you feel good while you fight for what's right. Awesome wood and pieces for display only. Hang them up or set them out. They're for showing off Acun's tough spirit. Want to help even more? Get a proto membership. So go to shop.isitwaya.com now and grab some goodies. Help Acun.top keep free speech alive, and let's keep the ideas flowing loud and free.
All reports can be found on Q Research or Qnotables.com. Notables do not equal endorsements. We are researchers who deal in open source information, reasoned argument, and dank memes. We do battle in the sphere of ideas and ideas only. We neither need nor condone the use of force in our work here. From the Q Research Board's February 4th, 2026. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent faced a combative House Financial Services hearing tied to the annual oversight of the Financial Stability Oversight Council. Under sharp questioning, Bessent walked back prior claims about tariffs being inflationary and argued recent economic performance contradicts that view. Democrats pressed him on consumer costs, financial stability risks, and the independence of major regulators. The hearing repeatedly devolved into interruptions as members fought over speaking time and the direction of policy. Israel's Justice Ministry announced indictments against a group that includes Israeli soldiers and reservists accused of smuggling prohibited goods into Gaza during the war. Authorities say the contraband included items like electronics and communication components that could provide material benefit to Hamas, with charges spanning wartime assistance to the enemy, terrorism financing, fraud, and bribery. Officials said the case highlights corruption risks and vulnerabilities at controlled crossings, and they are seeking asset seizures tied to the alleged scheme. Syria's state petroleum company signed a preliminary offshore exploration agreement with Chevron and a Qatari firm, marking what officials described as the country's first major step toward developing offshore oil and gas resources. The deal, structured as a memorandum of understanding, focuses on evaluating exploration and potential development in Syrian territorial waters. Reporting says the agreement is part of a push to rebuild Syria's energy sector after years of conflict, with early activity expected to ramp up before summer if assessments proceed. President Trump signed a stopgap funding bill to end a partial government shutdown and keep the federal government operating while lawmakers negotiate next steps. Reports say the measure funds key functions, including the Department of Homeland Security, for a short window, setting up another high-stakes deadline soon. Congressional leaders described the bill as necessary to avoid disruption, while warning the next round of negotiations will be harder as competing priorities collide over spending, border policy, and oversight demands. California's fuel market is bracing for tighter refinery capacity after Valero powered down operations at its Benicia refinery on January 31st, with reporting warning the closure could raise pump prices during supply disruptions. Analysts cited by outlets tracking California energy say the state's shrinking refining footprint leaves less buffer when outages occur. State officials and industry observers are watching inventories and wholesale pricing closely, and consumers are being warned that regional spikes are more likely when capacity drops suddenly. President Trump held a wide-ranging phone call with Chinese President Xi Jinping ahead of a planned U.S. state visit to Beijing later this spring. Reports say the leaders discussed trade issues and major geopolitical flashpoints, including Ukraine and Taiwan, with Xi raising warnings about U.S. arms sales to Taiwan. Trump described the call as long and productive and highlighted continued dialogue between the two governments. The conversation comes as both sides manage ongoing tariff friction while trying to avoid open escalation. Swiss reporting says the canton of Zurich is moving toward requiring retirement homes and hospitals to allow assisted suicide, including facilities with religious affiliations, while carving out exclusions such as psychiatric institutions and prisons. The proposal is framed as a response to a political initiative focused on end-of-life self-determination. Supporters argue residents should not lose access based on where they live, while opponents warn it could force institutions to permit practices they view as unethical. The measure now faces further legislative and political review. A growing political fight is unfolding in Washington over whether European digital regulation is being used as an indirect lever to shape American speech online. Committee materials tied to the judiciary hearing argue that enforcement actions and trusted flagger systems can pressure platforms to remove content beyond European borders. Legal experts say the core dispute is jurisdiction, whether an overseas regulator can effectively export speech codes through platform compliance. U.S. lawmakers are now weighing possible responses, including disclosure mandates and restrictions tied to cross-border moderation demands. Energy and foreign investment are back in focus in the Eastern Mediterranean after the Syria-Chevron-Qatar memorandum signaled renewed interest in offshore exploration. Analysts say Syria's waters sit in a region with major gas discoveries, but the technical, security, and financing hurdles remain substantial. Officials close to the project have indicated early-stage assessment work is the first step, with actual drilling and production timelines stretching years if the project survives political risk, sanctions complications, and infrastructure constraints. The administration's critical minerals push is expanding beyond stockpiles and into coordinated trade and pricing strategy, with officials arguing that volatile markets discourage long-term capacity building in the U.S. and allied states. Reporting from the ministerial meetings describes proposed standards and partnerships intended to lock in predictable supply for defense and high-tech manufacturing. Critics warn that price floors can create inefficiencies and trigger retaliation, while supporters say national security supply chains cannot be left to short-term market swings dominated by a single adversarial processor. Congress is heading into another funding cliff even after the short-term shutdown fix, with leaders warning the next package will collide with unresolved fights over border enforcement, agency oversight, and spending caps. Analysts say the brief extension buys time, but does not solve the underlying disputes that triggered the shutdown. Agencies are now operating under temporary certainty while planning for renewed disruption if negotiations fail. The next deadline is expected to become a pressure test for party leadership discipline and the administration's negotiating strategy.
Every voice matters. The power of free speech is more important than ever. Imagine a place where you can share your thoughts freely, explore new ideas, and engage in meaningful conversations anonymously. With online anonymity, you can express yourself without fear of judgment. It's about freedom, creativity, and connection. Join the conversation that matters. Embrace your voice. Celebrate your freedom. Visit 8kun.top today. That's 8kun.top.
That's all for now. Stay alert, stay informed, and never hand your thinking over to anyone on a screen, including me. God bless you, God bless our troops,